Families are spending money all the time. They're buying cars, they're going to restaurants, they're heating their homes, they're buying food, they're buying clothes, constantly and continually spending money. If you look at the UK alone, every week two-parent families spend about £650 and single-parent families spend about £310. Add all those families in the UK up and you get about £3.7 billion is spent every week by families. That's just in the UK alone. If you look at the US, that's around $1,200 a week for two-parent families and around $700 a week for single-parent families. If you start talking about Canada and Australia and you add together all the families from UK, Canada, Australia and America, and you're beginning to talk around $40 billion a week that is being spent by families. That's $100,000 a second. So families are spending a lot of money and they're spending it very rapidly as well. One of the things that I want to know as a marketer is how can I begin to influence how that money is being spent. So that influence originally was perceived to be very much an influence of the adults in the family, but actually a lot of research that's been done over the last 10-15 years has shown that children actually have quite a large influence over how that money is spent. And looking at this research and looking at things like the Office of National Statistics, we calculate that around 51-52% of all the money that's spent by families is actually heavily influenced by children. So actually children influence around $1 trillion a year and how that money is spent. So this is the thing that I wanted to cover today is what is that family purchase dynamic? What is that family consumption unit? How are decisions made within that unit? What is that purchase funnel within that unit? And what are its own unique set of behavioural economics which don't necessarily exist in single people purchase economics? We very much looked at in the past that decisions made on family spending was made by one person, usually the mother or the father, or potentially the two together. But actually, we're understanding that it's much more complicated than that. So what I want to cover off today is I want to look at how those decisions are made, and I also want to look at why I believe that the family consumption unit as an individual consumption unit is going to become more and more important over the next few years, and why understanding that unit is going to become more and more important over the next few years. First area is wasting resources. Families don't want to waste resources. Resources are becoming more precious, and that's resources in both time and resources in money. Time, families want to spend more quality time with each other, and money, they obviously, in this time of economic uncertainty, they want to make sure they're not wasting money as well. The last thing you want to do is drive to the cinema, park your car, buy the popcorn, buy all the ticket prices, and realise 10 minutes into the movie that no one in your family likes this and you're going to have to go home. That's money that you don't have that you don't want to be wasting. Time, exactly the same thing. You want to make sure that if you are going to book something like a holiday, that your children are looking forward to it, that they're excited by it, that it's not going to be a waste of time and money when you get there. So more and more families are talking to the family as a whole, and when they decide how they're going to spend their money and how they're going to spend their time. So children are being involved in decisions on what movie do we want to go and see, what do we want to do this afternoon, where do we want to go on holiday, what car do we want to buy, what clothes should we buy, what food should we buy. So more and more, as we are loath to waste money and loath to waste time, we want to make sure that everyone's bought into that decision on that individual purchase. The second reason is that who is the expert in the family is changing as well. Children are becoming actually experts on a vast majority of consumer goods. In the US in 2010, a survey was carried out and 1 in 5 mums turned to children for advice on consumer electronics. In the UK, 61% of parents believe that their children know more about the internet than they do. 63% of parents believe that their children know more about games consoles than they do. So they're typically the ones that are advising the family on what products to buy. We did some qual research recently, and a young boy of about 9 was advising his dad on what mobile phone his dad should buy. So children are actually becoming the experts in consumer products within the household and are beginning to be the ones that are advising the family on what are the good products to buy and what are the bad products to buy. And that's also not just exclusively from a functionality standpoint. They're also becoming much more savvy on what's, and actually the family is becoming much more reactive on what's the cool products to buy. So children, you know, there's a good example in the world of Top Gear and cars. Children are the ones that understand exactly what are the cool cars and exactly what are the less cool cars. And they're going to be, again, advising, and parents are going to be listening to understand which is the right kind of car to buy. The third reason is that more products are being created for the family consumption unit. So the obvious ones, such as holidays, obviously there's much more family holidays available now. Hotels are gearing themselves up to be just as much focused as children as they are at the adults. Cars are doing exactly the same thing. They're focusing as much as in the back seat as they are in the front seat. But it's not just those obvious ones, such as the cars and the holidays. Look at items such as the iPad. Again, aimed at everyone within the family. Children are using the iPad just as much as parents are within families. Games consoles, again, looking at completely rewriting that whole category, whereas before, kind of 10 years ago, games consoles were pretty much the sole domain of the children within the household. But now with the invention of things like the Wii, with Kinect for Xbox, with PlayStation Move, they are focusing very much on the entire family getting involved in these products. So more and more products are being available and being sold and pitched at the entire family unit. So as products are aimed more at that family unit together need to make the decision about which of those products they're going to buy. The fourth reason is parents are proactively encouraging their children to be more consumer savvy. So we're aware as parents that more and more our children are being targeted by messaging and advertising, and therefore we're ensuring that our children are more aware of this and are more savvy consumers. So as we educate our children to be more savvy consumers, we're actually asking them to make more informed purchase decisions. So more and more, particularly in the kind of Western world, more and more we're actually proactively encouraging our children to make those decisions because we feel it's important for them to understand how those decisions are made in the future. The fifth and final reason is the changing in roles and the lack of clarity that exists now in how decisions are made or should be made within the family. The definition of the roles within the family has changed more over the last 60 years than it has at any point in history. What fathers do and what mothers do is changing on a daily basis, and what society expects fathers and mothers do changes on an internal basis. So as there's less clarity in how those roles should make decisions, so a more collaborative approach is taken between not just the father and the mother, but also the father and the mother and the children as well. But I'm not just talking specifically about the more traditional nuclear family unit of father, mother and children living together. We're obviously seeing much more non-traditional family units appearing. And again, over the last 60 years, we're seeing an eruption of those from single parents, non-married couples, single-sex couples, step families, blended families where the mother and the father are bringing their own children together. And because they're not hindered by society's expectations of how decisions should be made within those family units, they're approaching decision making in a much more collaborative way. So decisions are made, rather than being made by the mother or father, they're being made again in a much more collaborative way. So these are the 5 reasons why I think that the family consumption unit and the family purchase dynamic is going to be something that's going to be very interesting to look at over the next 3 to 5 years. As families become more protective of their resource, both their time and their money, as children become more educated and experts within the family on certain product categories, as parents are more prone to wanting their children to make those decisions and encouraging them to be more consumer savvy, as products are made by manufacturers and brands that are aiming themselves more at that family unit, and as the roles within the family change, and therefore who makes those decisions isn't necessarily set in stone, and therefore a more collaborative approach is needed. So with those factors, I think we're going to see some very interesting things in how decisions are made within families. Who makes the initial decision to purchase a TV? Is that the father or is that the child? How does that influence strike within the family? Do we see more collaboration between individual family units, and how do you influence that whole decision-making process? So I think there's going to be some really interesting stuff over the next few years, and as that $100,000 a second worth of purchase is fought over more tightly, I think understanding how families work is going to become more and more important. So watch this space.